January didn't arrive loudly for Ginny and Jayna. It arrived quietly, almost carefully, which is exactly why so many people missed what was happening at first. No major press conference, no dramatic announcement, just a series of small appearances, subtle shifts, and moments that, when placed together, started to feel impossible to ignore. At the start of the month, fans noticed something unusual. Ginny and Jayna were no longer being promoted separately the way they had been before. Their schedules began to overlap. Events that would normally feature one name suddenly included both. Even when they weren't standing side by side, their names kept appearing in the same conversations, the same captions, the same rumors. Then came the photos. Not overly staged, not heavily edited, just candid enough to feel intentional. A glance here, shared laughter there. The kind of moments that don't scream publicity but quietly build attachment. Fans started clipping clips, slowing them down, replaying interviews, noticing how naturally they flowed together. It didn't feel forced. That was the key difference. Industry watchers picked up on it next. January is usually a testing month, a soft launch period where agencies measure reactions before committing to bigger moves. And the reaction around Ginny and Jayna was stronger than expected. Engagement spiked. Search trends climbed. Fan pages multiplied almost overnight. Suddenly, what looked like coincidence began to look like strategy. What made January feel different wasn't just visibility. It was confidence. Ginny appeared more grounded, less hesitant in interviews, more comfortable owning the spotlight. Jayna, on the other hand, showed a sharper edge, more playful, more daring, less careful about how she was perceived. Together, they balanced each other in a way that felt new, even to longtime fans. Rumors started to swirl about what this meant. Some whispered about an upcoming project being quietly prepared. Others believed this was a deliberate image reset, a way to redefine both of them before bigger announcements later in the year. No confirmations came, but the silence only made the anticipation stronger. By mid-January, one thing was clear. People weren't asking who Ginny and Jayna were anymore. They were asking what's next. That's the shift that matters most. When curiosity turns into expectation, something has already changed. January didn't give answers. January gave signals. And if this month was only the beginning, then Ginny and Jayna aren't just suddenly everywhere. They're stepping into a year that may redefine how the industry and fans see them entirely. As January moved forward, the signals became harder to dismiss. It wasn't just fans anymore. Media outlets began framing their names together, carefully at first, as if testing how far the conversation could go without crossing into speculation. Headlines softened the language, using words like growing presence and unexpected chemistry, but the message underneath was clear. Something was forming. Behind the scenes, the timing mattered. January is when agencies lock in direction for the year ahead, deciding who gets pushed, who gets protected, and who gets quietly prepared for a bigger leap. For Ginny and Jayna to be appearing this consistently during that window suggested intention. This wasn't random exposure. It was placement. Fans noticed how their interactions evolved. Early on, they kept things safe, polite smiles, respectful distance. But as the weeks passed, the tone shifted. They spoke more freely, teased each other in interviews, leaned into shared moments without hesitation. The comfort level grew, and with it, the belief that this wasn't a temporary pairing. What truly accelerated the buzz was how differently each of them was being positioned. Ginny was being framed as steady and reliable, someone ready for larger responsibility. Jayna, meanwhile, was being allowed to be unpredictable, expressive, even slightly rebellious. Together, they formed a contrast that pulled attention naturally. One grounded the narrative, the other kept it exciting. Then came the online reaction. Fan edits crossed platforms, comment sections filled with the same question, repeated in different languages. Is this just the beginning? The fact that neither Ginny nor Jayna shut the conversation down only fueled it further. No denial, no distancing, just quiet continuation. By the final weeks of January, it became clear that this wasn't about a single moment or appearance. It was about momentum. Each move built on the last, creating a storyline that didn't need official confirmation to feel real. People were already invested. And that's what made January so powerful. It wasn't loud enough to burn out interest. It wasn't small enough to be forgotten. It sat perfectly in between, planting expectation without revealing the payoff. Whatever comes next, whether it's a project, a partnership, or something entirely unexpected, January has already done its job. Ginny and Jayna didn't announce a new era. They let it unfold. And now, the industry is watching closely because when a story starts this quietly, it usually ends much louder. As the month drew closer to its end, the conversation around Ginny and Jayna shifted again, this time from curiosity to anticipation. Fans weren't just reacting anymore, they were preparing. Accounts began marking dates, tracking schedules, and comparing patterns from past industry launches. January, it seemed, was no longer just an introduction. It was a warning. What stood out most was how carefully controlled everything felt. There were no leaks, no accidental slips, no careless comments. Every appearance carried just enough intimacy to feel real, but never enough to reveal the full picture. That kind of balance doesn't happen by chance. It suggests planning, patience, and confidence in what's coming next. Observers also noticed a subtle change in how others around them behaved. Co-stars, hosts, even stylists began referencing them as a unit, sometimes unconsciously. Small phrases like the two of you or your dynamic slipped into conversations, reinforcing the idea that this pairing was already being accepted behind the scenes. For Ginny, this period marked a turning point. She wasn't being introduced anymore. She was being trusted. Her presence carried weight, as if the industry was quietly testing how audiences would respond to her leading something bigger. Jayna, on the other hand, appeared to be loosening her grip on expectations, allowing herself to be more visible, more expressive, more unfiltered. Together, they created a narrative that felt both safe and thrilling. By now, the question wasn't whether January had changed things. It was how intentional that change really was. Fans began to realize that whatever was happening hadn't started this month. January was simply when it was allowed to be seen. And that's what made it powerful. Because when a story reveals itself slowly, it gives people time to care. It lets curiosity turn into loyalty, and loyalty turn into anticipation. By the time the reveal comes, the audience is already emotionally invested. As February approaches, one thing is certain. Ginny and Jayna aren't stepping into something new alone. They're stepping into it with an audience already waiting, already watching, already believing that this year will belong to them. January didn't shout. It whispered. And somehow, everyone heard it. As February began to unfold, the quiet momentum of January began to transform into a palpable energy that couldn't be ignored. The anticipation that had been building now felt like a wave ready to break. Fans were no longer just speculating. They were creating theories, fan edits, timelines, and countdowns. Social media buzzed with the same refrain, something big is coming for Ginny and Jayna. The quiet control of their January appearances had planted seeds of expectation, and now they were flowering rapidly. Ginny and Jayna themselves seemed to sense the shift. Their interactions, once subtle and measured, began to carry more confidence. Interviews became slightly more playful. On-set moments that had previously been professional and careful now hinted at camaraderie and chemistry. The way they moved together, laughed, and shared glances, even in small, fleeting instances, started to feel intentional, as if they were aware that fans were watching every micro-moment. The industry also took notice. Executives and insiders began to hint at bigger projects behind closed doors. Speculation grew that Ginny and Jayna were being positioned for something that could define their careers this year, a lead-focused storyline, a digital collaboration, or even a cross-platform project combining drama, fashion, and live events. Nothing was confirmed, but the sheer volume of subtle signs made it clear this was carefully orchestrated. Fans, meanwhile, began drawing comparisons between how Ginny and Jayna were approaching their moment. Ginny exuded steadiness, grounded confidence, and a sense of preparation that suggested she was ready for responsibility. Jayna, by contrast, radiated spontaneity and creativity, a spark that kept fans guessing about what might happen next. Together, they formed a dynamic tension, two different energies complementing each other perfectly. By mid-February, the conversations had shifted from curiosity to speculation about impact. What would this project mean for their careers? How would it change their public image? And most importantly, what did it signal about the kind of influence they could hold over fans and the industry alike? Every new appearance, every subtle hint, every shared smile became a piece of a larger story that was being written in real time. The audience felt like they weren't just observing the rise of Ginny and Jayna, they were part of it, invested in every nuance, every tease, every step forward. And that's when it became clear January had been the quiet foundation, February was the ignition, and what lay ahead promised to be transformative. Ginny and Jayna weren't just becoming prominent, they were defining the pace and direction of 2026 for themselves, their fans, and perhaps the entire industry. No dramatic announcements were necessary. The world was already watching, and now it was waiting.